Imagine going to sleep in one of the richest cities of the ancient world, believing tomorrow would be just another ordinary day. The markets were full. Families gathered around evening fires. Children laughed in streets built by generations before them. Then, before the next sunrise, everything was gone. No warning, no army to defend against, no chance to escape. Within hours, an entire city that had stood for centuries became little more than ash and shattered stone. So complete was its destruction that over time many began to wonder whether it had ever existed at all. But buried beneath layers of earth, archaeology would eventually uncover evidence that transformed what many dismissed as legend into one of history's most haunting mysteries. How does a thriving city disappear almost overnight? And why was it forgotten for thousands of years? Tonight, we uncover the story. If stories like this remind you that history still holds secrets waiting beneath our feet, consider subscribing to Chronicle Nexus. Together, we'll explore the moments where archaeology, history, and mystery meet, and discover how the past still shapes the world we live in today. Long before Rome ruled an empire, before Athens became synonymous with philosophy, and centuries before the pyramids had fully surrendered their mysteries to modern archaeology, the lands east of the Mediterranean were home to powerful kingdoms whose fortunes rose and fell with astonishing speed. The Bronze Age was an interconnected world. Great cities traded copper from Cyprus, tin from distant lands, cedar from Lebanon, grain from Egypt, and finely crafted pottery from across the Aegean Sea. Merchant caravans crossed deserts, while merchant ships filled crowded harbors. Kings exchanged gifts, diplomats negotiated fragile alliances, and scribes recorded every shipment on clay tablets that by chance would survive long after the civilizations themselves had vanished. It was an age of prosperity, but also one balanced on a knife's edge. A failed harvest in one kingdom could trigger famine in another. A rebellion hundreds of miles away might interrupt trade routes that sustained entire economies. Powerful empires projected strength. Yet beneath the surface, they depended on networks far more fragile than anyone realized. Among these flourishing cities stood one whose name echoed through ancient records, royal correspondence, and later sacred texts. Hazor. Located in what is now northern Israel, Hazor occupied one of the most strategic locations in the ancient Near East. It overlooked vital trade routes connecting Egypt with Mesopotamia, Anatolia, and the Levant. Whoever controlled Hazor controlled commerce, diplomacy, and military movement across much of the region. Its influence reached far beyond its walls. Archaeologists estimate that at its height, the upper city and sprawling lower city together covered nearly 200 acres, making Hazor one of the largest cities in Canaan during the Late Bronze Age. Its population likely numbered in the tens of thousands. For its time, that was extraordinary. Massive fortifications surrounded elite palaces, temples, administrative buildings, workshops, and neighborhoods filled with ordinary families. Farmers arrived each morning carrying fresh produce through towering gates. Traders negotiated prices in bustling marketplaces. Bronzesmiths hammered weapons and tools, while scribes carefully impressed diplomatic messages into damp clay. Life was noisy, busy, predictable. Every sunrise brought another opportunity for trade. Every sunset reinforced the belief that tomorrow would look much like today. Yet history has a way of exposing the illusion of permanence. Powerful cities often appear indestructible, until suddenly they are not. Hazor was no exception. Its rulers commanded armies, its merchants accumulated wealth. Its temples honored the gods believed to protect the city. Its walls projected confidence. But confidence can become complacency. Across the surrounding regions, political tensions were quietly building. Rival kingdoms competed for influence. Egyptian authority over Canaan fluctuated as pharaohs struggled to maintain control across distant territories. Local rulers shifted alliances whenever it suited their survival. The diplomatic letters discovered centuries later at Amarna reveal a world filled with distrust. Governors begged Egypt for military assistance. Neighboring rulers accused one another of betrayal. Bandit groups threatened trade. Mercenary forces sold loyalty to the highest bidder. Far from being an era of peace, the Late Bronze Age was one of constant instability, hidden beneath outward prosperity. Hazor navigated this dangerous landscape with remarkable success. For a time, the city's kings maintained diplomatic relationships with major powers. Luxury goods flowed through its gates. Imported artifacts recovered by archaeologists today reveal connections stretching across hundreds of miles. Ivory carvings, Egyptian scarabs, Cypriot ceramics, fine jewelry, exotic materials unavailable locally. Each object tells the same story. Hazor was not isolated. It stood at the very center of an international world. And because it occupied such a crucial position, countless ambitious rulers viewed it as both a valuable ally and a tempting prize. Yet the greatest danger to Hazor may not have come from foreign empires. It may have come from a chain reaction unfolding across the entire Eastern Mediterranean. Around the 13th and 12th centuries BC, something extraordinary began happening. Powerful kingdoms collapsed with startling speed. Cities burned. Trade networks disappeared. Palaces were abandoned. Writing systems vanished from entire regions. Entire populations migrated in search of survival. Modern historians still debate exactly why this happened. Some point to prolonged drought. Others argue for earthquakes. Some emphasize famine, economic collapse, or internal rebellions. Still others believe waves of migrating peoples accelerated an already unstable situation. Perhaps no single explanation tells the whole story. Instead, civilization itself may have experienced a cascading failure, where one crisis intensified another until entire societies could no longer recover. Hazor stood directly in the path of this changing world. For years, perhaps decades, its people likely noticed subtle changes. Trade caravans arriving less frequently, prices increasing, rumors of distant cities falling, diplomatic envoys carrying increasingly urgent messages, merchants speaking in hushed voices, soldiers remaining on alert longer than usual. The warning signs were there. Few recognized what they meant. History rarely announces its turning points. Most people living through them believe they are experiencing only temporary hardship. No one imagines that future generations will describe their lifetime as the end of an age. Inside Hazor's palaces, officials continued recording inventories. Temple priests continued conducting rituals. Families continued planning weddings. Children continued learning trades from their parents. Life moved forward. Normality persisted, and that may have been the greatest illusion of all. Because somewhere beyond the horizon, events were already unfolding that would soon transform Hazor forever. Whether the threat came from invading armies, regional uprisings, internal revolt, or the wider collapse sweeping across the Bronze Age, the city's fate was rapidly approaching. Its magnificent walls would soon face a challenge they had never encountered before. Its rulers would be forced to make decisions with consequences reaching thousands of years into the future. And beneath the streets, where life still appeared ordinary, the final chapter of one of Canaan's greatest cities had already begun. The people of Hazor did not know it. They could not. Like every civilization before them, and every civilization since, they believed tomorrow was promised simply because yesterday had arrived. History would prove otherwise. In the next part, the warning becomes reality. Flames consume one of the greatest cities of the ancient Near East. And archaeologists uncover evidence of a destruction so violent that it continues to fuel one of biblical archaeology's most enduring debates. Who destroyed Hazor, and what really happened on the night the city fell? Morning still came to Hazor. The city awoke as it always had. Smoke drifted upward from ovens where bread was being baked. Merchants prepared their stalls with baskets of grain, oil, wine, and pottery. Craftsmen opened workshops that had served generations before them. Livestock were driven through the streets as children chased one another beneath the shadow of towering walls. Nothing about the sunrise suggested that this ordinary day might become the last in the city's long history. Yet beyond those walls, the world was changing with frightening speed. Across the eastern Mediterranean, kingdoms were unraveling. Powerful rulers who had once commanded vast territories suddenly found themselves struggling to protect even their own capitals. Long-established trade routes became dangerous, crops failed in some regions, political alliances dissolved almost overnight. Messages traveled slowly, but rumors traveled faster. Cities had begun to disappear. Some were abandoned by desperate populations searching for food. Others fell to invading armies. Still others burned under circumstances that remain mysterious even today. Every new report carried the same unsettling message. No kingdom was untouchable. Hazor's rulers likely understood this better than anyone. The city's strategic location had always been its greatest strength, but it was also its greatest weakness. Every major power wanted influence over Hazor because controlling the city meant controlling commerce between Egypt, Syria, Mesopotamia, and the kingdoms scattered across Canaan. Success had made Hazor wealthy. It had also made Hazor a target. Archaeological discoveries revealed just how magnificent the city had become. Excavations uncovered enormous administrative buildings, unlike anything found in many neighboring settlements. Massive stone foundations supported elaborate structures filled with imported luxury goods. Temples housed statues, ceremonial objects, and offerings collected over centuries. One discovery in particular captured the attention of archaeologists. Fragments of monumental statues were found deliberately smashed. These were not ordinary household objects accidentally broken during a fire. Many appeared to have been intentionally destroyed. Their heads shattered, their faces mutilated, their bodies broken into pieces. For historians, that detail matters. Throughout history, conquerors have often destroyed symbols of political or religious authority as a way of demonstrating complete victory. It is not enough to defeat an enemy. Sometimes the conqueror seeks to erase the identity of the defeated as well. Could that be what happened at Hazor? Or is there another explanation? The evidence invites questions that remain unanswered. Among the most dramatic discoveries at the site is a thick layer of burned debris covering large sections of the late Bronze Age city. Ash, collapsed mud brick, charred timber, blackened stone. The destruction was not localized, it was widespread. Archaeologists estimate that temperatures during the fire became so intense that mud bricks hardened almost like pottery. Wooden beams supporting roofs collapsed into rooms below. Storage jars cracked from the heat. Entire buildings caved inward as flames consumed everything combustible. Whoever witnessed the city's final hours would have seen an unimaginable scene. Columns of smoke climbing into the sky. Roofs collapsing one after another, families running through streets filled with sparks and debris. Animals breaking free from their enclosures, the roar of fire drowning out every other sound. For generations, Hazor had projected stability. Now it had become chaos. One of the most haunting realities of archaeology is that it often preserves the final moments of ordinary people. A storage room still filled with grain suggests someone expected to return. Cooking vessels left in place indicate meals interrupted without warning. Tools abandoned where craftsmen last used them reveal lives suddenly frozen in time. History often remembers kings. Archaeology remembers everyone else. Behind every burned building stood countless personal stories that were never written down. A father searching for his family. A merchant trying to save years of accumulated wealth. A child unable to understand why familiar streets had transformed into an inferno. These people left no names behind, only silent evidence buried beneath centuries of earth. And then, almost as suddenly as the destruction came, silence. The bustling marketplaces disappeared. The temples no longer echoed with ritual. Royal officials stopped recording transactions. Trade caravans found no city waiting for them. Hazor, once among the greatest urban centers in Canaan, had fallen. The question that has challenged historians ever since is deceptively simple. Who destroyed it? One possibility comes directly from one of history's most influential texts. The Hebrew Bible describes the Israelite conquest of Canaan under Joshua. In the book of Joshua, Hazor is singled out as the leading city of northern Canaan. According to the account, King Jabin organized a coalition of northern kings to resist the advancing Israelites. The battle that followed ended in a decisive Israelite victory. Joshua then captured Hazor. Unlike many other conquered cities, the biblical account specifically states that Hazor was burned. That detail has fascinated archaeologists for generations. When excavations uncovered clear evidence of a massive destruction by fire dating to the Late Bronze Age, some scholars viewed the findings as possible archaeological support for the biblical narrative. The timing appeared significant. The scale of destruction was undeniable. The city's importance matched the biblical description. But archaeology rarely provides simple answers. Other scholars urge caution. Dating ancient destruction layers is remarkably difficult. Even with modern techniques, establishing the exact year or even the exact decade can be challenging. Some researchers argue the destruction occurred earlier than a traditional reading of Joshua would suggest. Others believe it happened later. Still others propose entirely different explanations. Perhaps Hazor fell during regional rebellions. Perhaps rival Canaanite kingdoms attacked. Perhaps invading groups associated with the wider Bronze Age collapse were responsible. There are even theories suggesting internal political upheaval may have contributed to the city's destruction. Each hypothesis relies on pieces of evidence. Each leaves important questions unanswered. That uncertainty is not a weakness of archaeology. It is its greatest strength. Rather than forcing the evidence into predetermined conclusions, historians continue testing new discoveries against old assumptions. Every excavation has the potential to change the story. Every artifact becomes another voice speaking across thousands of years. Could history have taken a different path? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you had lived in Hazor during those final days, would you have recognized the warning signs or believed, like so many others, that tomorrow would simply arrive as it always had? As excavations continued, archaeologists uncovered another remarkable discovery: clay tablets. Though many were broken, they preserved traces of diplomatic correspondence, administrative records, and legal documents. Written in cuneiform, the international language of diplomacy during the Late Bronze Age, they revealed a city deeply connected to the wider world. Hazor was not an isolated fortress. It was part of an international network stretching from Egypt to Mesopotamia. Its rulers negotiated with kings hundreds of miles away. Its merchants traded goods from distant civilizations. Its prosperity depended upon relationships extending far beyond its walls. That realization changed how historians viewed the city's destruction. Hazor was not merely the victim of a local conflict. Its fall reflected something much larger: the collapse of an interconnected world. Modern societies often assume globalization is a recent invention. The evidence from Hazor suggests otherwise. More than 3,000 years ago, economies, politics, and diplomacy were already intertwined across remarkable distances. When those connections failed, the consequences spread rapidly. One kingdom's crisis became another kingdom's disaster. A failed harvest could interrupt trade. Interrupted trade could trigger famine. Famine could spark rebellion. Rebellion could weaken military defenses. Weak defenses invited invasion. Each crisis reinforced the next. Civilizations rarely collapse because of a single event. They collapse because multiple pressures arrive faster than they can adapt. Hazor may have been one of the clearest examples of that ancient reality. The city did not simply burn, it became part of one of history's greatest turning points. Its destruction marked not only the end of a powerful kingdom, but also the closing chapter of an entire era. The Bronze Age, the world Hazor had helped define, was beginning to disappear, and from its ashes, a very different world would soon emerge. But before that new age could begin, the ruins of Hazor would lie abandoned, exposed to wind, rain, and time itself, as generations passed without fully understanding what had happened there. The city that once dominated Canaan was about to become little more than a memory, one that even history itself would almost lose forever. For decades after the fire, the ruins of Hazor stood as a silent monument to catastrophe. The smoke eventually disappeared. The shattered walls settled into heaps of broken stone. Grass began pushing through cracked courtyards where kings had once received ambassadors from distant lands. Nature, indifferent to human ambition, slowly reclaimed what civilization had built. But the story of Hazor did not end with its destruction. Like many ancient cities, it refused to die completely. Centuries later, new settlers returned to the great mound rising above the surrounding plains. They saw not only ruins, but opportunity. The elevated position still commanded the trade routes. Springs nearby continued to provide water. The defensive advantages remained. A new city gradually emerged atop the ashes of the old one, yet it was never quite the same. The sprawling lower city that had once made Hazor one of the largest urban centers in Canaan was largely abandoned. Instead, settlement became concentrated on the upper mound. The population was smaller. The political landscape had changed. The age of mighty Bronze Age kingdoms had given way to the Iron Age, where new powers competed for influence. The world that had created ancient Hazor was gone forever. Generations passed. New rulers claimed the city. New walls were constructed. Older buildings disappeared beneath layers of fresh construction. Every generation unknowingly buried another chapter of history beneath its own foundations. This is one of archaeology's greatest paradoxes. The very act of rebuilding often preserves the past. Each new city seals the remains of the previous one beneath layers of earth, protecting them from weather and looting. What seems like destruction can become preservation. Hazor became a layered archive of human civilization. Beneath every street lay another street. Beneath every wall stood an older wall. Every layer represented lives lived, dreams pursued, and societies convinced they would endure forever. Among the rulers associated with Iron Age Hazor, one name has attracted particular attention: King Solomon. According to the Hebrew Bible, Solomon strengthened key fortified cities throughout his kingdom, including Hazor, Megiddo, and Gezer. These strategic centers became symbols of centralized administration, military preparedness, and expanding political influence. Excavations uncovered monumental gates and impressive fortification systems dating to the Iron Age. The six-chambered gate at Hazor closely resembles similar gates discovered at Megiddo and Gezer. Their architectural similarities have fueled decades of scholarly debate. Were these cities all part of a coordinated royal building program?
Did they truly originate during Solomon's reign, or were they constructed later under different kings?
Archaeologists remain divided. Some argue the evidence aligns well with the biblical account. Others believe the structures belong to a later period, perhaps during the reign of the powerful Omride dynasty in the 9th century BC. The debate continues because archaeology rarely offers certainty. Dating ancient structures involves pottery analysis, radiocarbon testing, stratigraphy, and comparisons with neighboring sites. New discoveries frequently challenge older conclusions. Hazor reminds us that history is not a finished book. It is an ongoing investigation. Every excavation raises as many questions as it answers. One discovery, however, has inspired remarkable agreement. In the 1950s and later during renewed excavations led by Israeli archaeologist Yigael Yadin and subsequent teams, researchers uncovered evidence that transformed Hazor from a name preserved in ancient texts into one of the most important archaeological sites in the Near East. Palaces emerged from beneath centuries of soil. Temples were revealed. Administrative buildings appeared almost exactly where ancient inhabitants had left them. Thousands of artifacts began telling stories no written document had preserved. Massive storage jars still stood where they had been abandoned. Decorated ivory fragments reflected extraordinary craftsmanship. Cylinder seals carried symbols from distant civilizations. Imported ceramics confirmed long-distance trade networks. And then came one of the most emotionally powerful moments in archaeology. Workers uncovered rooms where destruction had frozen everyday life. Not treasure chambers, not royal tombs, ordinary spaces, rooms where people had cooked meals, stored grain, conducted business, raised families. History often celebrates famous rulers, but archaeology gives equal importance to anonymous lives. The woman preparing bread, the child learning to write, the laborer carrying water before sunrise. The merchant calculating the value of imported copper. They rarely appear in history books, yet they built the civilizations that kings merely governed. When Hazor burned, it was these ordinary people who paid the greatest price. That realization changes how we understand ancient disasters. We often describe cities as if they were buildings. Cities are not buildings. Cities are people. Every burned doorway once welcomed a family. Every collapsed roof once sheltered sleeping children. Every broken storage jar represented food carefully saved for the future. When archaeology uncovers destruction, it also uncovers interrupted lives. That human perspective has become increasingly important in modern archaeology. Researchers no longer search only for monuments and palaces. They seek evidence of everyday existence, what people ate, how they worked, what illnesses they suffered, what they believed, how they adapted to changing climates, how they responded to political instability. Hazor has become one of the richest sources for answering those questions. Yet, even after decades of excavation, much of the ancient city remains buried. Archaeologists estimate that significant portions of the site have never been excavated. Each untouched section represents potential discoveries waiting beneath the earth. Perhaps another archive of clay tablets, perhaps new evidence clarifying who destroyed the city. Perhaps artifacts that could reshape long-standing historical debates. The ground still keeps its secrets. In 2005, Hazor received international recognition when it became part of the UNESCO World Heritage Listing, alongside Megiddo and Beersheba. The designation acknowledged something historians had long understood. Hazor is not merely an ancient ruin. It is a key to understanding the rise and fall of civilizations across the ancient Near East. Visitors walking through the site today often encounter silence. Birds cross the sky above collapsed walls. The wind moves through reconstructed gateways. Wildflowers grow where soldiers once stood guard. It is difficult to imagine that this peaceful landscape once echoed with merchants bargaining in dozens of languages. Or that kings once debated diplomacy within its palaces, or that one catastrophic night transformed everything forever. Standing there today, the scale of time becomes almost impossible to comprehend. Thousands of years separate modern visitors from the people who once called Hazor home. And yet, the questions they faced remain strangely familiar. How secure is our prosperity? How dependent are we on fragile international systems? Can powerful societies recognize danger before it is too late? Or do civilizations always believe they are more permanent than they truly are? Hazor offers no simple answers. Instead, it offers perspective. The people who built its walls believed they had created something lasting. For centuries, they were right, until they weren't. Their confidence was not foolish, it was human. Every generation believes its institutions will survive. Every society assumes tomorrow will resemble today. History repeatedly reminds us otherwise. The ruins of Hazor are not simply the remains of an ancient city. They are a mirror, a reminder that greatness and vulnerability often exist side by side. And perhaps that is why the city continues to fascinate archaeologists, historians, and ordinary visitors alike. Because beneath every stone lies the same unsettling truth. No civilization, however advanced or powerful, is guaranteed permanence. The only certainty history offers is change. But Hazor's greatest mystery may not be who destroyed it. It may be why its memories survived at all. For nearly 3,000 years, the city lay buried beneath layers of earth, its story hidden from the world. Had archaeologists never excavated the mount, Hazor might have remained little more than a name in ancient records, its grandeur forgotten, its tragedy lost to time. Instead, the earth preserved enough evidence for history to speak once more. And in doing so, it revealed a story far larger than the destruction of a single city. It revealed the fragile nature of civilization itself. History often remembers the moment a civilization reaches its greatest triumph. It remembers the kings who conquered distant lands, the monuments that touched the sky, and the wealth that flowed through magnificent capitals. Far less often does it remember the ordinary evening before everything changed. That is perhaps the most haunting lesson Hazor leaves behind. Its destruction was not simply the end of a city, it was the end of thousands of ordinary tomorrows. On the night before the fire, no one knew they were living through the final chapter. Parents likely tucked their children into bed, believing another sunrise would come. Merchants probably counted the day's earnings while planning the next caravan. Temple priests prepared for rituals they would never perform. Soldiers stood watch from walls they believed were strong enough to withstand any enemy. The city had survived wars before. It had endured political upheaval. It had recovered from hardship. There was every reason to believe it would survive again. History has a cruel habit of proving certainty wrong. Whether Hazor fell to invading forces, internal rebellion, regional warfare, or the wider collapse sweeping across the eastern Mediterranean, one fact remains beyond serious dispute. The destruction was devastating. The archaeological record leaves little room for doubt. Buildings burned with extraordinary intensity, administrative centers collapsed, religious structures were destroyed. The city that had dominated northern Canaan for centuries ceased to exist in the form that had made it great. And yet, the fire did not erase everything. Ironically, it preserved far more than anyone could have imagined. Clay tablets hardened in the heat rather than dissolving over time. Collapsed buildings sealed artifacts beneath protective layers of debris. Burned wooden beams marked the exact moment roofs gave way. Broken pottery remained exactly where it had fallen. The catastrophe that ended one civilization became the reason future generations could understand it. Sometimes destruction preserves history better than peace. That paradox lies at the heart of archaeology. Every excavation is an encounter with lives interrupted. Researchers carefully brush away soil one layer at a time, knowing that every fragment carries meaning. A cracked storage jar may reveal ancient trade. A charred seed may reveal climate conditions. An animal bone may reveal diet. A broken statue may reveal political revolution. None of these objects speak, yet together they tell remarkably detailed stories. Hazor has become one of the greatest storytellers of the ancient world. It reminds us that history is rarely written only by kings or generals. It is also written by potters, builders, farmers, children, merchants, scribes. People whose names have vanished, but whose lives remain etched into the earth itself. That is why Hazor continues to attract scholars from around the world. Every excavation season offers another opportunity to answer questions that have endured for generations. Who exactly destroyed the city? Was there a single decisive attack? Or did multiple conflicts unfold over several decades? How closely does the archaeological evidence align with ancient biblical accounts? How much remains undiscovered beneath the unexcavated sections of the mound? These debates are not signs of failure. They are signs of honest historical inquiry. Real archaeology is rarely about proving certainty. It is about following evidence wherever it leads. Sometimes that evidence confirms long-held assumptions. Sometimes it challenges them. And sometimes it reveals possibilities no one expected. Hazor has done all three. Its story intersects with biblical history, Egyptian influence, Canaanite culture, and the broader collapse of the Late Bronze Age. Each perspective contributes another piece of the puzzle. Taken together, they reveal something even more compelling than a single explanation. They reveal a civilization existing within a vast network of political alliances, economic dependencies, environmental pressures, and human decisions. Modern historians increasingly recognize that civilizations rarely disappear because of one isolated event. Instead, collapse often emerges from the interaction of many crises. Environmental stress weakens agriculture. Economic instability undermines governments. Political conflict disrupts trade. Migration increases competition for resources. Military pressure exposes existing weaknesses. One problem becomes another. Eventually, a society reaches a point where recovery becomes impossible. Hazor may represent one of history's clearest examples of that process. Its destruction was dramatic. Its decline, however, may have begun years earlier. Perhaps that is the deeper lesson. Collapse often begins quietly, long before walls fall. Trust weakens, institutions struggle, resources become scarce, confidence slowly erodes. By the time catastrophe arrives, many of the conditions that made it possible have already existed for years. The people living through those changes rarely recognize their significance. Only history sees the complete picture. Standing among Hazor's ruins today, visitors often experience something difficult to describe. The stones are silent. The streets are empty. The palaces no longer echo with conversation. Yet the city does not feel dead. Instead, it feels as though it is waiting. Waiting for each new generation to ask its questions. Waiting for another excavation to uncover another forgotten room. Waiting for another discovery that reshapes our understanding of the ancient world. History is never completely finished. Every generation rewrites it, not by inventing new stories, but by uncovering new evidence. That process continues today. Ground-penetrating radar reveals structures that remain buried. Radiocarbon dating grows increasingly precise. Digital mapping reconstructs ancient streets with extraordinary accuracy. Artificial intelligence now helps researchers analyze damaged inscriptions that once seemed impossible to read. Technology continues giving voices back to civilizations long thought silent. Hazor still has stories left to tell. Perhaps the greatest mystery was never why the city disappeared. Perhaps the greatest mystery is why humanity repeatedly forgets the lessons left behind by places like Hazor. Again and again, civilizations convince themselves that wealth guarantees stability, that military strength ensures security. That prosperity will naturally continue. History repeatedly disagrees. Empires rise, empires fall. Cities flourish, cities burn. Generations build believing their work will last forever. Future generations inherit the consequences. Hazor is not unique because it was destroyed. Many cities have suffered that fate. Hazor is remarkable because the Earth preserved its final moments with extraordinary clarity, allowing people separated by more than 3,000 years to witness the echoes of that ancient night. It stands as one of the most powerful reminders that civilization is both resilient and fragile. Capable of astonishing achievement, vulnerable to astonishing loss, and perhaps that is why this forgotten city still matters. Not because its walls were larger, not because its kings were wealthier, but because its story belongs to all civilizations, including our own. Its ruins challenge us to think beyond monuments and battles. They ask us to consider how interconnected societies survive and how they fail. They remind us that every great city, no matter how powerful, ultimately depends on the choices made by ordinary people. Those choices shape history, just as they always have, and somewhere beneath the soil of Hazor, untouched chambers may still wait in darkness, preserving answers to questions no historian has yet thought to ask. Perhaps one day another excavation will uncover evidence that finally explains who destroyed the city. Or perhaps the mystery will remain. History does not owe us complete answers. Sometimes its greatest gift is the search itself. If you've stayed with us until the very end, you've seen how one forgotten city can reveal the rise and fall of an entire world. Hazor's story isn't simply about destruction. It's about resilience, memory, and the fragile threads that connect every civilization across time. Subscribe to Chronicle Nexus for more untold stories from history's darkest chapters, and share this documentary with someone who loves powerful historical stories. If this story made you think differently about the ancient world, leave a like, share your perspective in the comments, and join us as we continue uncovering the mysteries that history buried, but never truly erased. Because somewhere beneath another forgotten hill, another lost civilization is still waiting to be found. And until then, history is never as silent as it seems.